When you grow, he gets smaller. When you're with a toxic person and you start to work on your development, your growth, your change, your healing, he gets smaller. What do I mean by that? Early on in our relationship, I was all about how to be in control. I was all about of how do I show my dominance? How do I show how I'm the man? How do I do all these things that were just abusive, but I was using in a way to try to establish dominance over my wife, making sure that I was never wrong, making sure that I was always right, and that making sure that I won all the arguments, making sure, and all these ridiculous things were just propelled by ego than it was actually manliness. And oftentimes what happened is I would push her down, I would beat her down mentally and emotionally so that she wouldn't actually stand on her own 2 feet. So she would feel like, well, I'm not going to bring that up to him because I'm scared. I'm not going to actually talk to him about this because he's just going to rage out at me. He's just going to get upset. There's many times that she would bring up different things that I would go bananas. I would go absolutely crazy on her because of the fact that I didn't want her to get close to the truth. She'd bring up that I was cheating on her. She'd bring up that I was lying to her. And it would turn into this berating time of putting her down, making her know that she was stupid for even thinking this, making her know that she was ridiculous for even imagining that. Why would I do something like this to you? And all the time I was actually doing the things that she kept accusing me of. And this is the thing that narcissists will do. They'll keep putting you down over and over and over again. When my wife got to the place where she left, it wasn't just a fly-by-night decision. It's one that she waffled back and forth on for such a long period of time because I'd promised her certain things. I told her I'm going to get better. I told her that I was going to get change, but I didn't actually show it. There wasn't this piece inside of me that was actually transforming. I was just like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. But I didn't think she'd leave. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. So I kept minimizing it. My wife during this period of time had started into therapy. She started working on herself and she'd gotten to a place where it kind of almost capped out. I think that's the best way to put it. This is one thing we've noticed inside of toxic relationships and people that are in therapy in the relationship. You typically get to a place where you actually have a ceiling, where you kind of cap out. You reach the height and you're like, no, that's as high as I can go. And inside of this, you typically only get to a certain level because you're in a toxic environment. You're in the sludge and the shit and you're not able to actually move forward in the healing process because of the simple fact you still have all this stuff getting poured in. It's you're trying to heal up a wound and each day you take off the Band-Aid and someone kind of cuts the wound back open. And you're like, well, it's not healing. Well, yeah, it's not going to heal when you're inside of this toxic environment. And finally, my wife realized that to a point where she left. She took her daughter, she moved out of state. Now, this is after years of therapy. Okay, this is after her working on herself over a good period of time. But then when she left, there was this difference piece that happened. One, there was a buffer. Okay, and by a buffer, I mean she was out of the house, so she wasn't first off in my energy. I wasn't able to come home and just have this negativity or this energy that would be this walking on eggshells. And she'd be worried, how is he going to respond? How is he going to react? And am I going to say something wrong? Is he going to yell at me? She was out of my energy. So it let her actually take back some of her power and some of her energy to be okay, this isn't just me. This is the environment that I'm in. It also created this buffer space inside of communication. Because she didn't see me and she didn't interact with me. There wasn't this face-to-face communication that narcissists love, because if they have face-to-face, they can manipulate more. So I knew I was losing control of her because she was leaving. It was frustrating me. It was spiraling me out in different aspects. And at the same time, it was good, she's gone. Now I can go do the shit that I want to do. And so there's this piece inside where she was I love him, but I need to actually get away. So she left and created this buffer space out of my energy and created this buffer space of okay, now I can actually interact with myself and not get triggered with him 24/7 being around, interacting with me, talking to me, yelling at me, all these kind of things. And so inside having this buffer space, it reduced our communication more and more and more. During the several months when she was gone, there was a piece where our communication was very, very little. We had some communication because our daughter was still with her. We had 2 times in 5 months that we actually swapped my daughter for a weekend. So I could play the good dad part, so I could look the role, right? Because that's all I was doing. And inside of this, we hardly ever talked on the phone. We hardly ever FaceTime. We text and communicate a little bit, but it's very, very small. That buffer in communication did something different for her. It helped her see who she actually was apart from me. It helped her see how she could actually live apart from the toxicity that I was putting on her. And it helped her to see, hey, I am not this person that's just this broken, messed up person. He's actually the one that's putting this on me, that's placing it on me, that's projecting it onto me. And so when she was away from my energy, when she was away from the house, when she was away from how I was treating her, she started to go through this process of healing. And like I mentioned before, you can typically only heal to a certain level when you're inside a toxic relationship. So for her, she had to leave. For majority of people, you have to leave. There's not this level of you finding 100% being healed when you're inside the relationship. Because typically he's never doing the work, and typically he's not showing up in a way that's actually going to transform his mindset from the inside out. So you have to actually make a step, make a direction of like, I'm going to work on myself regardless. So there's a piece when my wife left that she started working on her. She'd been doing that, but had been under the impression of me. It'd be under all of the stuff that I was putting on her, and it didn't actually let her blossom and grow. So when she left, she started to get clear faster and faster and faster because that environment wasn't toxic. That environment wasn't beating her down. That environment wasn't screwing with her mind. That environment wasn't giving her the mental fog. So she started to grow. As she started to grow, my influence on her got smaller and smaller and smaller. Like the abusive person that I was to her got smaller and smaller and smaller because I didn't have the effect. I didn't have the steps. I didn't have the things that I could do to her to get the reaction, the response. Instead, I was losing that control. You need to understand when you are actually healing and you're moving forward, the toxic person in your life is going to feel it and is going to try to draw you back in because he knows that he's losing control over you. 2 weeks after my wife left, I called her up. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I get it. Like this is just, I'm sorry that I made you feel this way. Like, this is just stuff that I've been going through. Like, I just want you back. Like, I want to make this work. Like, I really am sorry. And she knew it was all fake. She knew that I'd still been talking, interacting with other people, other women. She knew that I wasn't actually putting in the work. She knew that it was way too quick for me to magically change. Because that's what your narcissist will do. They'll get fixed after a therapy session. They'll get fixed after a couple quick things of self-help. But my wife had already seen the game multiple times. She'd already seen me play it multiple times. And so she rose above it and she said, no, I'm not coming back. And in doing this, she grew to a new level. Like she grew to a new level in her strength. Because in previous times, she would get suckered back in. She'd get pulled back into the relationship. But at this point, she knew that's not for me. And my influence on her got smaller and smaller. After that attempt, that Hoover attempt, I pretty much was like, well, screw you. I'm going to go do what I want to do. And she didn't hear back much from me in the next 5 months. Because I didn't care. I wasn't willing to actually put forth the effort into that relationship. When you're inside a toxic relationship, he's going to continue to try to manipulate you, try to hoover you, try to come back into your life over and over and over again. And especially when you start to grow, when you start to heal, whether you're in his life or whether you're outside of his life, expect him to know. Like narcissists have like this like seventh sense of like, she's healing now. Let me call her up. Expect them to know and try to come back. Expect them to know and try to pull you down. Try to get their claws in you just a little bit more to try to pull you back down. Because the toxic, narcissistic, abusive person understands and realizes as you go through the healing process, as you start to rise up in your power, he gets smaller. He gets more insignificant because you realize, hey, it's no longer about him. This is actually about me. This is actually about my growth, my development, my healing. And not about you projecting your worth onto me. Have you seen this happen? Have you seen this be a part of your life? Where this piece of manipulation has gone back and forth. As you grow, he becomes smaller. The question is, are you willing to actually go down this path and you actually grow? Actually develop into who you're called to be. It might mean you have to look like the bad guy for a period of time because he might badmouth you, he might blame you, he might smear you. Is that not worth it to actually be free from toxicity? Is that not worth it for you to actually stand up in your freedom, in your power? Clearing out the mental fog, getting rid of the addiction to the toxic person, and you actually knowing who you are, the direction you want to go. If you're a woman that's stuck in a toxic, abusive relationship, and you're ready to go from being trapped in the relationship to having freedom, please go to rawmotivations.com/breakthrough to see how we walk people through this whole process of trapped to freedom today.